Okay, hi, AP. Hope everybody's well. This will be jerky. You know how I do. So, I've not really filmed myself much. Anyway, hope things are going well. As always, if you need to contact me, T. Thomas and blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to start right in. We were in the middle of the judiciary thing. And the last thing I believe we had down was writ of certiorari. If any of you need that, just get it from somebody or you can look it up. It's easy. But what we're ready to do is kind of start when the court actually takes a case. So I'm just going to say this verbally, and you can run it back if you need to and so on. You can look this stuff up. I enclosed a sheet. I will enclose a sheet that has basically how the procedure goes, but sometimes it's good to hear it from someone. So anyway, the first thing that happens is that briefs are prepared. The clerks, if I remember to talk about the clerks, they prepare a brief of the case. Here's the case history. Here's what happened at the local. Here's what happened at the district, and so on and so on. Here's what happened with other cases, like back in the day, kind of related to it, or that might relate to it. And here's how those were decided, and that all becomes what's called case law. So then the justices get that brief, and they'll read through it, and then they will come in for the court. Now, I'll also enclose a picture of the Supreme Court, what it looks like. Open to the public. Good luck getting in, but open to the public. But anyway, they walk in and the guy stands up, the bailiff guy. Oh yeas, oh yeas, oh yeas. God save the United States in this honorable court. Everybody stands. And then the justices sit down. Everybody sits down. So then what happens is each side gets 30 minutes typically. 30 minutes per side. The respondent and the plaintiff. So anyway, the judges already know about the case. It's not like they need to be told what's going on. They've already read this. So this basically is the only chance that these guys have to make their case in front of the courts. So they don't do stuff like, ladies and gentlemen, here's my, blah, blah, blah. They get to the point. And what ends up happening usually is the justices ask questions, and that 30 minutes is included. Questions are included in that time. Trying to poke holes, trying to get a sense of what exactly are you trying to argue here. So once that time is up, unless the Chief Justice allows an extension, which does happen sometimes in bigger cases, like with the Obamacare case back in the day, they allowed 4 hours. I think with Obergefell, the gay marriage case, they allowed maybe 4 or 2, something like that. But typically an hour is all that's allowed. So, there's good and bad to that. Think about that. It's something that you might be asked to deal with there. And then they're done. And then they'll take a little break, and they'll come back later in the day. Normally they'll do 2 a day for 3 days a week during their session. So it's not like a whole lot of, day stuff. So then what'll happen is that, okay, don't picture like Judge Judy where she's like, blah, 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 she stole my hamster, and no, I didn't, you gave her to me, and she tasted delicious, and blah, 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 and Judge Judy rolls her eyes, and then she says, okay, after the commercial, I'll be back with my verdict. It's not how it goes. They'll hear arguments on, white versus black, and then they'll hear arguments on red versus green, and so on and so forth. And then months later is when you'll get the decision. So picture like, listen, so on and so on. And then, like I said, in maybe November, and then again usually in May, is when they'll be like, decision. Okay? So in the meantime, what they'll do is that they will get together in just the judges, no clerks, no staff, no nothing, and talk about these cases, probably the day after or something like that. What do you think? Robert says. and they kind of all give their views about what they think about the issue. And you can kind of tell, you usually kind of get an idea from the questions. But I don't know. It's this is where most of the, I guess, the work is actually done as far as deciding. And they can try to convince each other, or they can try to just give their views, or just sort of, sound off on ideas and so on. So they talk, and then they kind of take an informal vote, if you will. What do you think about this? And then they'll eventually take a formal vote. And it just takes a majority to win. So 5-4, 6-3, 7-2, so on. No matter what it is, if it's 5-4 in favor of black, then he wins. And if it's 5-4 in favor of white, he wins. Typically, and let me tell you this, I'm thinking about it sometimes, always in Supreme Court cases. Okay, Brown versus Board, Obergefell versus Hodges, Marbury versus Madison. The first group listed, the first name listed, is always the person that lost the previous case. Okay, they lost the previous case, so they are appealing up to the Supreme Court. So, when Brown versus Board was heard, you know that Brown was the first name, so they lost in the previous court. So that when the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in their favor, they overturned the previous decision. So sometimes you get a case, you're not quite sure, you see that might help you out, get a point somewhere. Okay? Now, like I said, 9-0 and 5-4 is the same verdict, but it doesn't send the same message. 9-0. You guys that play sports think about winning some baseball game 23-0. That's a way different thing than 3-2. It sends a message. Maybe that you're kind of an ass, but whatever. But it tends to send a stronger message and create a stronger precedent. If you remember, we talked about precedent back on the first page. So either way, there it is. So then what happens is when they release the decision, they have opinions. Okay? And if you see on your page, on the bottom of the second page, the outline's on here too, if you need that. If you don't, then you should already have it. There's one, and then the back page, the third page, there are two. So the first opinion is the majority opinion. So let's say the case is 5-4. Okay. The majority gives their reasoning. Here's why we did what we did. Okay. It's what creates sort of, here's our reason. Here's our point to this. Other courts are to use this. A case comes to Anderson someday, they would use the majority opinion in this case to guide their ruling. So anyway, simply a reasoning of why they ruled the way they did. Okay? Now, who writes it? You might ask. Are you asking? If the Chief Justice is in the majority, okay, he or she will decide who writes it. They could write it themselves, they could give it to somebody else. Normally, frankly, if it's a big case, Brown versus Board, they're going to write it themselves because, you're the boss. You get to do what you want. If it's like some APA freshman team case, poop versus fart, then they might let the new guy write it, just like anything else, the freshman guy. Kavanaugh, who likes beer, I've heard. So anyway, they decide. If the Chief Justice is not in the majority, then the most senior member that is in the majority, think like Ginsburg or someone, then they would decide who wrote it. So same thing. Just depends on which side they're on. Okay? Majority. Hopefully you can hear me. This is awkward. The second type, and moving to the third page over there by Judge Wapner, that picture, who's like the original TV judge, is called the dissenting opinion. Now, the dissenting opinion is the minority, obviously, but it doesn't have to be. There can be more than one dissent. Sometimes you have people dissent for different reasons. But normally it's under one dissent, and here's why we disagree with the ruling. And as far as writing the opinion, it's the same rules as the majority opinion. The Chief Justice or the most senior decides. But this becomes important because a lot of times the people that are, when you think about Roe versus Wade, the abortion case, this case that's coming up before the court next year, trying to not overturn it, but kind of overturn it, will use some of the dissent from Roe versus Wade, which the pro-life side lost, to use their case, to make their case. Whereas the other side will use the arguments in Roe from the majority to try to make their case. So, when you think about, again, Brown versus Board, sorry to keep using that, but it really works. There was a case back in the 1890s that said separate but equal facilities were okay, as long as they were equal. And the dissent argued, well, here's why it's not right. And then that's what was basically turned into the majority opinion in Brown when they overturned that precedent. So these become very important too, and it's all part of, like I said, that case law. Mesmerizing. Anyway, thirdly and finally, the concurring opinion is when you've got justices, and this happens all the time because you got, independent-minded folk who are smart, who agree with the majority, but for a different reason. Okay? And they write their own opinion. So if you think about something like Obergefell with the gay marriage is legal. And let's say the majority opinion says it's legal because it's a violation of the 14th, which we'll get to later, but basically gays should have equal protection just like race, based on race, just like based on gender. And therefore, that's why we think they should be able to get married. Whereas a concurrence might be like, well, I agree with that decision, but I don't really agree that's the most important part. And the most important part is supremacy of the federal government to rule over the states. Something like that, if that makes sense. And you can get, I've seen cases with 3 concurrences, but normally you might have 1 or 2 within that. So if you've got a case that's not unanimous, you're going to always have a majority, always have a dissent, and usually have a concurrence, if that makes sense. Okay? So after that, we then move on to the last thing I'm going to do here, and then I'm going to do another thing for tomorrow, or the next day, whenever, is about announcing it. A lot of times these are very anticipated. The protesters, for whatever reason, will gather on the steps of the Supreme Court and so on and so forth and await this decision, which is announced, usually just posted online or something. Here's how the court rules. And then you've got all the news reaction and all the, griping and cheering and so on and so forth. Most cases don't get much reaction because you don't really know about them. The big cases, like we've been mentioning, they're going to get reaction and then be dissected and so on and so forth. So, Supreme Court. Any questions? Let me know. All right. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you later. Bye.